using a double-blind format of 8 overlapping demographic groups. Every region of the country was sampled. The focus testing showed a solid base in the 9 to 11-year-old bracket, with a possible carryover into the 12-year-olds. When you consider that GoBot's transformers hold 37% market share, and that we are targeting the same area, I think that we should see 1/4 of that, and that is 1/5 of the total revenue from all of last year. Thank you. Any questions?
No. Not for me.
Yes? Yes?
I don't get it.
What exactly don't you get?
It turns from a building into a robot, right?
Precisely.
Well, what's fun about that?
Well, if you had read your industry breakdown, you would see that our success in the action figure area has climbed from 27% to 45% in the last 2 years. There, that might help.
Oh.
Yes.
I still don't get it.
What?
What don't you get, Judge?
Well, there's a million robots that turn into something. And this is a building that turned into a robot. So what's fun about playing with a building? That's not any fun.
This is a skyscraper.
Well, couldn't it be like a robot that turns into something like a bug or something?
A bug.
Yeah. Like a big prehistoric insect with maybe like giant claws that could pick up a car and crush it like that.
A prehistoric transformer?
Interesting.
Gentlemen,
So the robot turns into a bug.
gentlemen,
you should
listen,
listen
if
to
you
him.
would
He's
just...
got a very good idea here. The robot turns into a bug.
This is a great idea.
Someone's a
What?
water bug?
Different sizes and things. And
Susan, we could do
scorpion.
ladybugs.
You could have them wreck buildings.
Transformers for girls.
A building is an earth, a bug, it moves. It's got all kinds of possibilities.
This doesn't just happen. This guy just doesn't happen. He doesn't just come to a meeting and say bugs.
Ants and stuff. And
Well done, Judge. Well done.
In 1988's Big, Tom Hanks brought the perspective of a 13-year-old boy, Josh, into the toy design world. It's a jarring experience for the seasoned executive, Paul, played by Josh Hurd. Despite all the data Paul presented in this meeting demonstrating the potential of his skyscraper bot, Josh brought a different data point, the real voice of the customer. Josh knew kids and how they thought, not just because he was one, but because he talked with them all day long. That same kind of insight exists in so many organizations, but just like in Big, it's ignored by the people developing products. It exists within the support team who is having conversations with customers all day long. Sarah Caminiti is the VP of Customer Success at DNSimple and an advocate for support teams having a seat at the product development table. She joins Next in Queue this week to discuss the importance of support's voice in product development, why surveys shouldn't be the only source of customer insights, overcoming barriers to support team involvement, fostering open lines of communication, creating a culture of communication, and 2 support lessons learned from hospitality. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Today, Sarah Caminiti, you are next in queue. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. I am so glad that I am sitting with you on a Monday. And yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic, although I have to warn you while we are getting ready to record this, I can see the wind coming in. It's been cloudy all day, and it's tornado season here in the Midwest. So I do know that things are moving in, and hopefully they don't get really nasty while we're recording. But if for some reason I disappear, hopefully it's just the power and not my house being taken to Oz. But, that's what happens when you live in Kansas. It's possible.
It's true. It's true. I watched The Wizard of Oz with my son for the first time this weekend, and I am here to guide you through this Kansas tornado journey as best I can if you need it.
So I have to ask, how old is your son, and what was the reaction to watching that movie?
I have two little boys. One is 1 year old and the other is 4. And Wizard of Oz was my favorite movie growing up. I'm talking watching it 3 times a day. Obsession was Dorothy, I think 4 or 5 times for Halloween.
Wow.
So I really leaned in hard, and I've been setting the stage for this introduction for a little while. We've done books, we've done songs. We've talked about it because The Wizard of Oz is very different from The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is his favorite movie, and it's not as bright all the time as what is out there today. So we set the stage, and he was hooked, totally hooked. It was a blast. Yeah.
It's really amazing how a really well-crafted story and production can age as well as that one has aged, because I mean, we're talking about a movie that's nearly 100 years old at this point, and it's still delighting kids of all ages today.
It was magic. It's still magic. It's while I will say, as an adult watching it, I haven't watched it in so long. A lot of things stood out. The costumes were much. I don't want to say homemade, but they carry just a very special quality that I completely glossed over when I was a kid watching it all. So that was fun too.
Yes, those people who work in costuming these days in Hollywood, I mean, it's pretty amazing what they pull off. And their budgets, though, are probably a little bit different, I imagine.
Slightly different. Yeah.
Well, they do a great job supporting productions, and support teams do a great job supporting products. You like what I did there? And we're going to talk about support teams today. That was my really, I don't know. I thought that was a clever attempt at a segue. I'm not so sure that it worked out, but we're going to go with it anyway.
Nailed it. Totally nailed it.
Yeah, that's what I like to think. So before we do that, let's learn a little bit about you. Who are you? What are you doing today? And what are you most passionate about?
Yeah, I am Sarah Caminiti. I have been in and around support in a variety of ways since my first job, where I worked at a general store. I ran from support many times because I didn't think that it was something I wanted to do as a career. And then I found my way back. And I'm so glad that I did almost, probably close to 10 years ago. And I've really just been leaning into the opportunities that the tech space affords support. It's a much different environment to make something wonderful without as much red tape for the most part as you would find in call centers of my, 18, 19-year-old days and retail. So it's been a fun experience building and growing support teams. And right now I am in this awesome space of exploring what it means to share things publicly and have really cool conversations with people that I normally would have probably stopped myself from entering in the conversations for. So it's a period of owning my experience, my knowledge, and connecting with lovely folk like yourself and learning from you. And I am so excited for this phase of life with a podcast, with just all kinds of cool things on the horizon. And it's great. It's a great spot.
You are doing all kinds of cool things. I know
Yes.
this firsthand. Lots of behind the scenes things, and those things are coming to the forefront very quickly. You are
Yes, they are.
doing some master classes and the podcast circuit, if you will. I hate
Yes.
to say that like it's this,
True.
I don't know, this thing that people do because they're in a certain role. They're not. I think people get on podcasts because they want to share what they've learned. And that I know is one of the reasons that you are taking this plunge and hopping into podcasts. So congratulations on that piece. You just talked about sharing, right?
Mhm.
And sharing can be a little bit of a vulnerable space, but
Very
I
much.
feel like support teams often don't get to share or be involved when it comes to product and product development. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, we don't have 17 hours to really dive into all of my thoughts on this, Rob, but truly, I think that for years, support has operated in its own little, I want to call it an island because that seems like it's more of a, we forced ourselves over there, but support serves a purpose. It served a purpose for a long time. It continues to serve a purpose, but it never really had a chance to be a part of the conversation. And so the data that was there was not, maybe there wasn't a chance to utilize it, or you didn't even know that it was there to utilize. And through this, it's, I think, generations of teams and leaders not realizing their voice and the value that they bring to a company with what they do is so great and so exciting. And this is such a great space in this moment for support with all of the changes that are going on with AI and with just opening the door to conversations to analyze what does support do, what are they capable of, and who are these intelligent, incredible folks that that are the ones that are talking to our customers on a daily basis. So I think we're in a moment of change, a good moment of change.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. One of the things that I feel like companies get trapped in is this idea of voice of the customer being based off of surveys.
Yes.
What's your reaction to that?
I hate a survey. I hate a survey because I know myself, and I know I'm not everybody, but I like to think that I'm not an outlier in having zero interest in completing surveys. And you see all these things come in. You see all of the CSAT things after you talk with products that you're using as a consumer. You see email after email after email looking for information or feedback, and sometimes they even like to stick gift cards for it to get you to do it, which kind of tells you how much of a struggle it is to get people to do it. You have to pay them to. But surveys are completed by a specific group of people. There's either the folks that are really angry and really vocal and they want it to be as loud as humanly possible, or they're the folks that are just this cool group of people that like to complete surveys when they come in and like to share their thoughts. That pool, though, is very small, and you're missing out on the actual customer experience. You're not allowing yourself to really take in what it is that the customer is going through when they're using your product and ask thoughtful questions. Support provides a great space for an introduction to that. But again, you're talking to folks that are frustrated. So understanding how to really communicate with customers in a way that extracts information from them when they're in the right headspace to think about how they use the product. Surveys, I do not think, will ever be the answer to that.
Yeah, I think that companies that only rely on surveys are missing out on a treasure trove of customer data and insights, and they're missing out on a treasure trove of insights from their support team, because they not only see the problems and hear the problems firsthand from customers, but often they have really good ideas about how to quickly solve things. Like,
Yes.
it doesn't always take a product developer to come up with a great, elegant way to fix a problem. Sometimes that person that's just answering customers knows the best way because they've heard from customers. It'd be great if you could just do this. And they go, oh,
Yep.
yeah, I should share that.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't product teams pay attention to support? Is it just because they're too busy developing? Where's the disconnect there?
I think it's a cultural thing. I truly do. I think that the product teams, at least in my experience, want so much to involve support in it all, but when they're in the throes of it and they're stressed and they're trying to get things done as fast as they can because their timeline is not what they hoped that it would be, or something else came up and they had to focus on that and it took away from them being able to do XYZ. Like, I mean, when you're working in a tech space, curveballs are not just a support thing. They are the name of the game, and timelines aren't always flexible. So I do believe that the product teams know that the support team needs to be included, but they don't have the capacity to figure out how to make it happen, and that connects all the way every time to leadership and what they're putting in place, what they're enforcing, what kind of conversations they're having. Because if the head of product is in their own space of we know we have to focus on these people, we know that we have to talk to this person, the UX person, that's who I'm going to go to ask them questions about how the customer uses the product, then that conversation never happens about what if, why don't we see what's going on over there. And I love what you said about the folks in support having a solution. And I mean, one of my biggest frustrations of my career in support is the focus on coming up with a problem statement instead of a solution, because while that works beautifully in so many areas of a business and is a great way to look at things differently, bringing a solution when you are presented with many, many, many different problems in different ways that are all kind of connected in a special way is what support is. That is, we're just getting tossed problems nonstop. And so, yeah, of course, our brain is going to go to a solution, and it's not going to do it justice if we try and pigeonhole the problem into maybe the majority of what these questions are for the problem statement. We need to look at this as a big picture and how this impacts all sorts of things and what the solution could possibly provide.
Yeah, it seems like there is a need to have this ongoing dialogue
Yes.
between the development, the product team, the development pipeline, and what future state looks like, and support and understanding, number one, what problems do we have right now? And I also think there's sometimes support people, because your knowledge is of the problems, but not necessarily of the complexity of the problem.
Yes.
That being able to have that dialogue sometimes can help support understand, yes, we know this is a problem, but we also understand either where it falls on the roadmap and why we're not addressing it right now, or what the level of complexity is and why it's not being addressed right now, or what the priorities are. So support people who aren't getting that are often just the ones who are apologizing, and they don't really know, and it can lead sometimes to some not great behavior where they might say something like, I know, Sarah, that this is really frustrating. It's frustrating for me too, and I don't know why we haven't fixed it yet. It's silly. We should have fixed this already.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that
is
or
rapid.
they should have fixed this already.
Right.
Even worse, right?
That frustration is bubbling over at that
Mhm.
point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Understandably.
it's one thing for a customer to be frustrated by an issue. It's another thing for that person who's answering that issue over and over and over, day after day, and maybe they hear about it a dozen or more times a day. Eventually they get frustrated if they don't understand why we're not prioritizing it. And so that piece of the dialogue can really have a big impact too. You talked about the differing priorities, and particularly when you get in the throes of it and you get timelines, and that happens like every company. Product development, like, we want to have X feature out by this Friday, and so it's all hands on deck to work on this feature or this group of features. What other challenges besides just that do you run across or have you heard about that really stop that communication or stop support from really being, involved in product decisions?
I think that the biggest blocker is not having a chance to show what's possible. And I think that really connects to exactly what you were saying with the transparency and the communication. And when we start making assumptions about what information is available within support, I have assumptions is something that I think about a lot because I think that they just are the root of many problems. But when you're running a company, when you're running a team, when you're a team lead, you have to stop allowing your brain to go to that space of they're not, they can't, they won't. And you've got to ask why. Why do I think that support wouldn't enjoy knowing this? Why do I think that these teams wouldn't be able to handle this level of complexity? I think that the nuances and the technical nature of so many of these companies is also a bit of a blocker because, again, folks are making assumptions about what other teams are able to take in and absorb in a way that is effective. And what I found when I was building my own team is I wanted to try something out. And because I had felt those frustrations that you were describing so many times. And it was also just so frustrating because I could not understand why it was not possible to just share the information with everybody. It's there is no reason why the definitions of things, why the true plan for the company has to be contained within 3 people. And so I tried something where I really didn't hold back on anything, and just to kind of see what happened. Like, I always thought that I could take it, but what happens when you really are transparent about what the project roadmap is, or what the realities are of product development, or this great idea that you had with your team when you were brainstorming, what the reality of that is? No, that thing's never been invented before because it would take us 17 years and stuff that doesn't exist. Oh, cool. I'll stop thinking that you're avoiding those conversations for other reasons, and just eliminate that moment of doubt. Because once that doubt of, do they value me? Do they value the customer the way that they do? I'm saying all of these things so loudly. Why is nobody listening? That is when you start to lose great employees, and you lose customers because of that too. And we've got to really make an effort to figure out why we are so hyper focused on keeping things contained, and the amount of time we spend hiring and training, and the thought that goes behind every person that we invite into our company gets lost, because we don't hire them because we don't think that they're capable people. We hire them because we think that they're capable of so much, and often we don't give them a chance. So invite everybody to those conversations. Invite those ideas and those solutions into the conversation. And if it turns out, hey, for this next quarter, we have to handle tech debt. We never had a chance to handle tech debt. We really got to go like balls to the wall on this. Then everybody knows. Nobody is thinking they don't understand. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. No, everyone has been heard. The decision has been made. The authority levels have not been breached. It is just, okay, I got the context. Let's move on and see what else we can do, maybe within our team or with this other team that's not involved in it. So yeah, I think that the biggest blocker in all of this is a lack of transparency, because it prevents other departments to problem solve together and think about ways that they can make improvements themselves outside of even just product development.
Yeah. You used a really powerful word there a few times, and that word is invite. And it makes me think about how we invite someone into our homes, right? When you invite someone, you're allowing them to really come into your home and see it warts and all, right? They're going to have to use the bathroom, and so they're going to see what that looks like.
Yep. Whether you preface it before they enter of, please don't judge me, they still are going to see it.
Yeah. And so you're being a little bit vulnerable and allowing someone to see your home. And then, right, I'm not going to have you come in and then we're just not going to talk, right? That's typically what happens when you do that.
Terrible evening.
It would be a terrible evening. So we're going to have conversation, and that conversation often leads to something vulnerable and enlightening. And I think when we change our mindset to our employees being people we're offering just as a chance for employment, but instead someone that we're inviting into the company, we're inviting them to have those conversations. And I do think a little bit, it's just about the mindset. Like,
completely agree.
How do we view that relationship? And if we view it the right way, it can change how we operate.
It can change how we operate. It can change how those people that we've invited in continue on with their career journeys, whether it be within this company or with that or in another space. Having a team or a company that feels like they are valued and they are heard on whatever capacity it is, and is where you allow space for beautiful things that you would never have thought were possible if you just kept in your corner.
I love that. Let's get tactical.
Yeah.
What are some things that support leaders can do to foster these opening lines of communication? Let's say I'm in a company where they're really, I don't, as support, have a seat at the table. And maybe the product team just isn't really open to that just yet.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to start to bridge that gap?
There's a couple of things that you can do, and every company operates differently. So take all of this with, a grain of salt, because I don't want to paint things in different ways for different spaces. But in my experience, being loud in a very specific way is helpful. But also you have to, as a leader, kind of just let the personal attachment to the conversations, to the questions, to the team, to the whole big picture of it all, that's got to be gone. And you have to enter into conversations with folks, removing yourself and having it be, I want to know how I can best serve the customer with your help. I want to know how I can do this for us, instead of you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And think about who we are as support professionals. I mean, when you really do think about the type of folks that find themselves in these situations, we are the most skilled and knowledgeable of navigating these sorts of conversations, but yet for some reason we're always so nervous. And I think a lot of it comes down to, this isn't a department that you get a degree in. You don't go to school for it. You can't read a book necessarily that covers all of the curveballs and there's great chunks everywhere, but finding like one space where, when I am in this section of my career, I'm on day 97, more than likely this is going to happen. Okay, now I can prepare for this. That doesn't happen. So you have to go in bravely and blind, and be open to the idea of failure. And so when you do encounter these teams that have never had someone really promoting this as a company change, because that's what it is, it's a company change, you have to approach it in a holistic way, because it's not just product. You've got to think about how everybody touches everything, and you've got to think about how you can change your way of presenting or asking to best serve them. And one of the biggest wins that I've found is realizing, for the most part, I'm always going to start these situations, conversations, relationships with how I would like to be treated in this, how I would like to see data, or how I would like to ask questions or be engaged. And everybody is so different. But if you start it and say, this is what's going to happen, just so that you know who I am and where I'm coming from with this, and you understand my intention. After we're done with this, I'm going to take a second and I'm going to ask you if you liked how I shared this information, if this was the information that you really did find valuable, if this was the approach that worked best for you. And if it wasn't, if there even was just a slight thing that you thought once you heard it or saw it, why didn't they include this? Why do they call it this? Just tell me. I'm not going to be offended. Like, the whole point of this is for us to learn together and become partners in this. And this is a safe space. That is when you get to have really cool conversations, at least in my experience.
I love the idea of getting feedback on how you're sharing and how you're leading a conversation. anyone who knows me knows that that's a passion of mine. So I love that you brought that in. You talk about change. I want to talk about a little bit different kind of change. You are originally from Maine. Is that accurate?
For the most part, yes, a Midwesterner from the early years, but became a Mainer when I was about 8.
So let's talk about then. You spent some time in the Louisville area.
Sure did.
What was that transition like? And now you're back in the Upper East Coast. You're in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what was that experience like in the Louisville area for you? What did you find different? And then what pulled you back to the Northeast?
Yeah, it's a great question. We went to Louisville to run away from the winter. And Louisville ends up having worse winters than Providence, Rhode Island, which was a super fun surprise. But my time in Louisville was such a learning experience because even though I come from a family from Iowa and Michigan, and the Midwesterners have a very specific way of navigating life. And then you've got the Northeasterners, especially rural Northeasterners, over from Maine. And then you've got Louisville geographically, it really is not the South, but man, do they present themselves as folks in the South. So it was, I lost a little bit of that that idea of everybody going about things in a specific way, everyone's purpose, everyone's connection to other humans. And this isn't a negative thing. I think that we all find these situations that we're in, and we need to make sure that we allow ourselves the grace to use it as a chance to grow as people and reflect on it. And I was the executive assistant for CEO in Louisville, and I got to see what a Southern man in a CEO space who was acquiring a bunch of different companies, like what the realities of that was. Like, what kind of conversations did he have? It pulled the curtain away. And I hadn't seen that before. And I'm so glad that I did, because now I don't make those same assumptions about the reasons why people navigate the business world the way that they do, because I've seen it happening in so many different spaces. And so once we started growing our family, and COVID happened, and Louisville was a different space, we knew that we wanted to come back to where we grew up. And we didn't want to be in Maine, because we didn't want to be in Maine, but we wanted to be close to things, because that's something that Maine doesn't have access to. You're in Maine, and you have the one shopping mall, and we got our first Taco Bell when I was in high school, and I drove 45 minutes multiple times a week to go and get it. But we wanted our kids to grow up in a place that was diverse and connected, and we're close to Boston. We're close to New York City. We've got the RISD school here. We've got Brown. There's so many different things that, regardless of how our children grow and where their interests are, there's going to be a space and opportunity for them. And so we landed in Providence, and we've been loving it.
I love, though, that you took the opportunity to learn and experience and gain something from a city that is culturally different, right? I mean, the Upper East Coast, you're right. Louisville is very much, I would say, has a Southern identity and a lot of tradition that goes along with the South. And so gathering some things about mindset of how people operate and being able to incorporate that into just an understanding, not a this is negative or bad, but it helps me understand where people are coming from, can help inform. And I think that's true of all across the country and all across the world. Just being able to have an understanding of where people are coming from and what they value and why they do things the way that they do things helps us all when we're interacting with them,
Very much.
because we can hone in on those things if and only if we understand it. You also, as I understand, have a little bit of a background in travel.
I do, yes.
So I want to hear about that, but then I have a very specific question about it. So what's your background in travel?
Yeah, my background in travel. Well, I worked for a European car rental company when I was late teens, early 20s, and quickly found my way onto the VIP team and got to know all the travel agents, because that's what the VIP team was. It was the place where you send the folks that are really good at building those relationships. Something that I've learned later after reflecting on my life of my career is I've always been very, very skilled at creating a safe space quickly. And not something I ever practiced or tried to do, but I can de-escalate things, I can read the room, and I can do my best to make people feel comfortable. And that has been something that I have really tried to grow as I've gotten older and lean into, especially once I've started with leadership. But with travel, I was helping all these folks with all of these different trips that they were doing for their car rentals, all these travel agents with all these big name people doing all of their trips. And it sounded so incredible. Like, can you imagine spending your days just thinking about the best way for these people to enjoy this one time in a year where they get to go and relax? What can I do to go that extra mile? And to think after this, I tried to run away from customer service for years and years. But it was a blast. And after I left to run away from customer service, one of the VIP folks offered me a job as just someone on their team. It was a father and son, Gemütlichkeit. It's a European, German car rental space, and they were one of the biggest customers. And Bob Bester he's the guy that runs it. It was just him and his son. They never let anybody else in, and then they let me in, and I worked with them for almost 10 years. Still haven't met them in person, but we just did our thing, and it was just something on the side. And I just kept thinking, like, why do I keep wanting travel to be in my life all the time? Let's be a travel agent. And so then I was a travel agent, and travel agents are not like they are on those 1950s themed television shows that that came out in the mid 2000s. No, it is. I realized I just like planning trips for the people that I love. And I learned some cool tips and tricks to score deals and to focus on keywords and how to optimize the dollar as much as possible. But the corporate culture of travel is not as much fun as the thinking about the experience for the people that you're creating something for.
That's an amazing story. But the question that I want to ask, now that we understand where your background is, what's the one surprising skill that you honed while you were in that space that you find yourself utilizing today that, again, would be surprising?
Two. I'm going to go in two different directions.
Bonus.
Number one, the skill that may not be a surprise, but it was the biggest takeaway that has kind of changed how I approach support. And I realized that later on is the questions, understanding the right questions. How do you approach things in such a way that actually gets those folks that are coming to you? Because folks that are coming to a travel agency must be lost, because with the opportunities you can find online, you have to get to a certain point of, I cannot do this by myself. Please, can someone help me? That you have to phrase things in a very specific way in order to extract the actual nuggets that you need to give them what they're trying to articulate. Same thing is true with support, regardless of the product. You have to know the right way to ask those questions to fully understand, because when folks are in a panic, when they're stressed, when they're angry, or when they're just generally confused and they don't know the right terms, you could end up wasting a lot of time going down all of these different rabbit holes if you don't know how to just take a step back and really think about what they could be trying to say. And it goes again to understanding the person on the other side. It's just putting yourself in their shoes. And if you were lost trying to plan a European trip for the first time, what is it that you would really, really want someone to ask you? And that carries over. And then from I'm an agent, how can I utilize my resources way? Don't be afraid to go to the source. Don't be afraid to take all of that stuff that gets fluffed in there and just go to the source and get the context and have that conversation, because someone's coming to you in travel and they're asking all these questions about these horror story reviews that they saw on TripAdvisor, and they're so bummed because this was their dream. Then you call the place and you ask to talk to the manager and you have a conversation about what this person is looking for. Ask them if there are other properties that could possibly fit their needs, that are affiliated with them, or if they had a bad experience, if the customer had a bad experience last time. Ask them, what has changed since. And when you do that, it provides such a level of care to the customer of, this person values me so much and values the success of my trip, that they are not going to just pay me lip service. They're going to take a second to call the place, verify that things are different. And then also, this is what I would do. I would call when they're on the trip and I would check in with that same manager. And then you get to build those relationships. The same exact thing holds true within your company. And don't allow yourself the headspace of, I'm just going to take this information and make my own ideas about what it means. No, go to that developer that shipped this and maybe forgot to loop you guys in and ask, hey, what happened? I really, really would have liked to have seen a copy of this before, or next time, let's make a point to have monthly check-ins or weekly check-ins when you're working on these products. Like, just force yourself to think bigger and think about the impact that those things have. And I think those were two big nuggets that I took away.
I love it. I mean, they're great, right? Asking great questions and being resourceful are secrets that shouldn't be secrets, right? They're skills that you can apply in so many different roles, facets of your life. I'm curious on a more personal level. So obviously I'm going to assume, haven't been to Germany to meet the father and son.
Oh, he actually lives in Oregon.
Oh, they live
he lives in Oregon. Yes.
They live in, okay.
Yeah.
I made an assumption, Sarah.
There we go,
We talked about assumptions already.
Sure did.
I made an assumption, but I want to ask you, after all of this experience of planning wonderful trips, what's on the bucket list for Sarah and family? Like, if you could pick one spot, maybe a spot that is underrated or people don't think about, because I think, right, there are lots of cities and places that people go, oh, well, yeah, that's an obvious one. What's something that's not obvious that you're like, I discovered this gem?
Why didn't you ask me to research this before this call, Rob? Come on. Oh no, I will say now, this isn't necessarily the number one on my bucket list for like, I got to go there next, but I do really, really want to go there. Every single person that I spoke to that went to the Czech Republic said, this is one of the most magical places I have ever been. Everyone is so kind. It's just beautiful. Like, the architecture is incredible. The food is incredible. There is so much more to do that is culturally enriching, but also gives you that I'm on a vacation, living it up vibe. That it truly came up all the time that you have to go to the Czech Republic.
All right. Well, there's your hot travel tip from
I'm here all day.
Sarah, and she knows what she's talking about. She's been doing some travel things for a while. Sarah, it's so great to have had you on the show to talk about all the things that support can provide to an organization. It's not just a cost, it can provide so much more. And I really just can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here.
Rob, thank you. This is such an honor. It was such a great conversation. It's something that's on top of mind, obviously, since I rambled so much about it. But I think it's such an important topic that people need to be okay with asking questions about, and realizing that support folks want to do this. Sometimes they just don't know how. And if you're in another department and you're seeing someone trying, then just reach out and tell them what you need in order for it to work, to start that conversation. And if you're a support person, just start asking questions, because you've got what you need. You are more skilled than you realize, and just let yourself shine.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. I hope you have a great day.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.